From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in the early 1990s on the set of a Spike Lee movie, where the legendary director was thinking about the music in his films. Whether we realize it or not, the score of a film has a profound impact on our emotions, on how much we remember of the film, on what we might be humming when we go home from the theater. Spike Lee knew the importance, and he was watching a trumpeter named Terence Blanchard, who had played on the score for School Days, and he had played the trumpet for the scenes in which actor Denzel Washington is playing trumpet in Mo' Better Blues. During a break in the studio, Spike Lee noticed that Blanchard was playing around, noodling on a new theme that was unfinished, and Lee wanted to know, what was he playing? When he found out it was an unpublished piece of music, the director wanted to use it, and he knew he wanted Terence Blanchard to score his films in the future. They've been working together ever since, with Blanchard doing more than a dozen of Spike Lee's films: Jungle Fever, Malcolm X, Inside Man, BlacKkKlansman, and more. Blanchard has won Academy Awards for his work. And now Terence Blanchard is coming to Rochester to perform as part of the only film music festival in North America. It's called the Soundtracks Film Music Festival, set for October 16th through the 18th at the Eastman School of Music. That's next week, as well as other venues, by the way, in the city of Rochester. And in addition to the highly anticipated performance by Terence Blanchard, attendees can hear performances of the music from the film Interstellar, the music of John Williams reimagined, the RPO performing Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, among a long list of other concerts. There are also speaker sessions on the music for video games, the craft of music for animation, composer conversations, and more. We have a lot to talk about this hour. Let me welcome our guests in studio. Kate Schimmer is with us, Associate Dean for Artistic Planning at the Eastman School of Music. Thank you for making time for us.
Very pleased to be here.
Welcome to Alexander Lang. Alex is President and Artistic Director of the Gateways Music Festival, and we're going to be talking about some overlap and partnership here. Great to have you back here.
Hey, happy to be here.
With us on the line, I'm honored to welcome Terence Blanchard, a Grammy-winning and Oscar-nominated composer and trumpeter, a musical polymath, and someone who's probably overqualified for my interview skills. Terence, welcome. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
And Mark Waters is with us, co-director of Soundtracks, an Emmy-winning composer and conductor, and associate professor of contemporary media and film composition, director of the Beale Institute for Film Music and Contemporary Media at the Eastman School of Music. Hi, Mark. Thanks for being with us.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to talk a lot about Soundtracks, although Gateways is also coming up, and there's some really interesting overlap happening. So I'm going to ask Kate and Alex to kind of set the stage first here. And Gateways is up first. That's coming. What's coming up, Alex?
So Gateways opens on Monday, this coming Monday, the 13th. We open up with our Rochester Day for Strings. So that's an outgrowth of our Young Musicians Institute, which is the umbrella term we use for all of our youth programming. So that's an all-day event for string players here in Rochester. We're going to do some technique work. We're going to do some work on improv. We're going to learn and work on a piece by the Chevalier de Saint-Georges, Joseph Boulogne. And then we're going to share that out with community and family and friends at the end of the day. So we start off with a free all-day event for young people. On Tuesday, David Barry will be in recital, a pianist. We always have a piano recital as part of Gateways. That's a tribute to our founder, Arminta Hummings Dumasani, a visionary artist who started Gateways in 1993 in Winston-Salem and then moved it to Rochester when she was hired in a joint position by the Eastman School of Music and the Eastman Community School. So David Barry is going to give an incredible piano recital that's really bridging the tradition of Black classical artistry, particularly spirituals, and the virtuosic piano tradition, so Chopin, Liszt. So that tradition, both of those traditions live inside him. So he's going to demonstrate both, talk about the similarities and connections that he finds between those. Wednesday is an exciting concert. We're going to have the second iteration of our Gateways Chamber Players. That's our variable ensemble. It's sort of like a mini Gateways. So we bring together 4, 7, in this case 9 outstanding players from great institutions, the Juilliard School, Metropolitan Orchestra, Cleveland Orchestra, et cetera, get to come together in that sort of typical Gateways way, get to play with players they would not otherwise get to play with, have that homecoming feel, which is really our signature. So that's great. That program is going to end with the realization of Samuel Coleridge Taylor's his Nonette. So Coleridge Taylor is a Black British composer writing in kind of the early and middle part of the 20th century. late 19th to the 20th. And then on Thursday, we have our crossover event in many ways, and particularly it's a joint offering. So that our finale also marks the opening of the Soundtracks Festival, and we're so excited to be collaborating with a living legend that I'm thrilled to be on the phone with right now, Terence Blanchard, to have him with us and his E-Collective and the Gateways Festival Orchestra, bringing to life in real time for an audience here in Rochester this incredible art that has grown out of his collaboration with filmmakers, of course, specifically Spike Lee. So it's a really wonderful week of collaborations and crossovers and celebrating this tradition of Black artistry and classical music that Gateways is home to. And we're thrilled to have this true collaboration with the inaugural Soundtracks Festival to both end our event and kick off their event.
So big stuff coming up in the next week. So the end of Gateways marks the start of Soundtracks. And in a moment, we're going to talk to Terence about the work in his career and what he's going to be bringing to Rochester. Before I do that, Kate Schimmer, I was, I think, 14 years old in the early 1990s. And back then, kids don't realize now, you couldn't just get any piece of music you wanted with a snap of a finger and the touch of a button. And I had watched a movie, I don't know why as a 14-year-old, I watched this movie that the critics didn't even like, and it was about this heavy subject in which a couple finally conceives they're having a child, and then the husband finds out he's dying of cancer. And Michael Keaton played the husband, Nicole Kidman played his wife. The movie was called My Life. And the score of that movie, for some reason, as a 14-year-old, I found it so touching, and I recorded it with a cassette tape up against the television because I wanted to learn how to play it on a piano. Now, I don't play piano. I don't play hardly anything, and I can still play the My Life theme with my fingers on the piano because I don't know why it hit me that way. It wasn't even that great of a movie, but the theme hit me. And for some reason, the power of music and film, I think, you can't pick what's going to hit you, but it matters. It really does matter, and it makes an impact on the audience, on the film. So tell me why Soundtracks exists here. How did this come together?
This is such an important moment, and I'm so glad that you had that moment in your life. This is wonderful. Mark Waters would also have an absolutely fabulous take on this. Music is how people connect. It's how people connect with each other. It's a universal language. And when we're talking about film, it's yet another vehicle for people to share some part of themselves. So this is more and more how people are becoming exposed to music as well. When you see a commercial, when you see a cartoon, when you see a full-length feature film, as you did, you're hearing music that may be original, may be something that a classical composer wrote years ago, maybe something new that was influenced by that. And this is taking shape more and more in the classical music landscape. More and more orchestras, professional orchestras, are performing film scores. They're performing it with films. They're performing the music of John Williams, the music of, and this is an important thing that we need to grab onto. This is the way the world is going. Digital media, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, became ubiquitous. It was how we were engaging with art, and Eastman has done something really extraordinary with the Beale Institute. Jeff Beale, who'll be here conducting the red violin, and his wife, his incredible wife Joan, have with Mark created the Beale Institute, which is where we teach kids about how to engage with film music, where we teach kids about how to engage with technology and music. Mark Bacco, who's one of the other directors of Soundtracks and is a distinguished professor at the Hagem School of Engineering, is also involved with this. And Eastman is really on the cutting edge of bringing movie music, bringing music and technology to the fore in the classical music industry. So having Soundtracks at Eastman, having the first film music festival in North America here, was a completely natural fit. We have lots of students who can benefit from this experience. And it also gives us a chance to start exploring a field that classical music has perhaps not embraced as fully as it should have.
So later this hour, I'll ask Kate to kind of walk us through as fast as we can all of the events. There are a lot of events. It's not just the Terence Blanchard show, although that's a big one. But there's a lot happening, and we'll have a link on our website in the show notes if you want to jump on the website to find out what's coming up with Soundtracks starting next Thursday, the 16th. Mark Waters, do you want to just elaborate a little bit on the power of music in I would say in film, but also in streaming shows? I mean, I was such a nerd about House of Cards. I couldn't believe I had a chance to talk to Jeff Beale years ago when I found out that Jeff was the guy, and he's right here in Rochester doing that great track there. Why do you think it matters so much? And tell me a little bit about the art of it.
Well, I think you kind of proved it when you were talking about the My Life movie, that here was an element of the movie that stayed with you. I mean, music connects with us in a way that's different from hearing spoken words, from how we see visuals. We are receptive to the sounds of music. And you don't have to be a musician to do this. In fact, you better not be, or we're in trouble. Music can communicate with us in ways that are so unique. And from the dawning days of, before there was sound and picture, in the days of so-called silent movies, it really wasn't silent because there was music playing, because filmmakers knew that music could complete the storytelling in a way that is unique. So it became an art form, and definitely perpetuated by our esteemed artist that's going to be with us on next Thursday, Terrence, whom I'm a huge fan of. I'm so honored to have you, Terrence, next week, and just delighted that our partnership with the Gateways Foundation is it's just fantastic. It's so, I love it when things happen organically, just by accident, so to speak. We put in the dates that we wanted to have it at Eastman. Oh well, it turns out Gateways is finishing their festival, and we got the great idea. Well, let's combine. Let's make their last day our first day, and then the magic happens.
Well, Terrence Blanchard, your musical repertoire goes well beyond just the Spike Lee movies, of course. And my understanding is that your movie music that's going to be performed next Thursday has only been performed twice before. So why did you agree to come here? How did they convince you to come be part of this event, Terrence?
Well, for me, whenever I get a chance to do something that's interesting or do something a little different, I'm always excited about it. Also, when you listen to everybody talk about this festival, you can feel the passion that everybody has for the art form itself. So why wouldn't I want to be a part of something like that? Especially in the city of Rochester. I have a lot of fond memories of playing that festival earlier in my career. And then playing with a youth orchestra, hopefully to inspire some young musicians to want to enter into this realm, whether as a performer or as a composer or as a producer, is an exciting thing for me.
I want to come back in a moment to your film work, but there's a couple of things that I think will help the audience understand a little bit more, because in the music world, Terrence Blanchard is a legendary name. For our listeners who are not in that world, this may be their first introduction to Terrence Blanchard. And I want to ask you a little bit about a story that I heard you tell that might describe a little bit more about who you are and the regard you are held in the music world. So there's this story that you tell about being in a rehearsal at the house of a pianist named Bruce Barth in Brooklyn. And you got a call that day from someone claiming to be the great Sonny Rollins, maybe the greatest jazz saxophonist of all time. And at first you thought it was a prank. Can you tell the story of what happened there?
Yeah, I'm at Bruce Barth's home in Brooklyn, and we were having this rehearsal. And all of a sudden, his wife comes in and she goes, "Terrence, Sonny's on the phone for you." And I'm like, "Sonny? Who? Sonny who?" And then I get on the phone, and he has that very distinctive voice. "Sir Terrence, it's Sonny here, Sonny Rollins." And I'm like, "Come on, man. Who's playing a prank on me at Bruce? How does Sonny Rollins know that I'm at Bruce Barth's home, first of all?" And then he goes and he says, "Well, Paul told me a lot about you." And Paul was one of my teachers at Rutgers. Paul Jeffries, who was the last saxophonist that played with the Thelonious Monk's band. And he was good friends with Sonny Rollins. So when he said, "Paul told me a lot about you," I knew it was Sonny Rollins at that point. But the funny part about it, he wanted me to play a show with him at Carnegie Hall, and which I was very honored, excited to do. And at the end of the call, he says, "We're going to make history." Now, whoever says that when they're asking you to do a show with them, man.
Amazing. But you claim that when you finally got on stage with him, that his talent was so big that you almost felt pushed to your limit to be with him.
Not pushed past my limit. Because it was in rehearsal, man. He was really nice and jovial. But come the day of the show, it was like game day at the Super Bowl, man. He had on a game face that was just very different. And it was pretty nice. You know, we played a couple of tunes and he was okay. Man, we played that third tune and he wanted us to trade, go back and forth. And he played so many musical ideas. I went through everything I knew 3 times, you know. And I was literally going, please stop, please. You know, and it was funny because when he called me for the gig, I talked to a good friend of mine, Branford Marsalis. I said, Branford, man, Sonny Rollins called me to do this gig. And he said, well, just go get your butt kicked like everybody else.
What an amazing story. We're talking to Terence Blanchard. In the fall of 2021, Terence Blanchard became the first Black composer to have an opera presented at the Met. And I know, Terence, you told NPR that you've spent a lot of time thinking about lineage, about Black composers who maybe never had a work presented at the Met, but certainly were qualified to. And so one of the things that stood out to me from that interview, there's some themes that Alex and I have talked about with Gateways, which is that, you know, there are times where, because of the way our society has been structured, a person might be, well, the first woman to do something, the first Black composer. And you get a lot of attention for being the first, but maybe not as much emphasis on the lineage that was just as deserving, whose names didn't get on that stage. Can you talk about the risk of putting too much emphasis on the first when there have been so many qualified individuals before you?
Well, that's a perfect point. That's a perfect way of putting it, because, you know, people have been asking me, what does it feel like to be the first African-American composer to be at the Met? And I said, listen, man, it comes with a bag of mixed emotions. I mean, it's exciting for anybody to go to the Met. I don't care who you are, but I know that I wasn't the first qualified. And I remember I was on a national syndicated television broadcast, and they brought out this ledger that had these names of these composers who were rejected. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. I was just in St. Louis a few months before then, and I heard this opera, and I thought that because they were the ones who commissioned me to do my first opera. So when I heard this opera, I thought they found another jazz musician who was really hip and young, because this thing sounded so amazing. And then I come to find out that opera was written in 1939, you know, by William Grant Still. And when I looked in this book had his name next to that same opera that was rejected by the Met. And the comment at the time said, doesn't know what it takes to write real opera, which really blew my mind. But to go back to the other point, you know, I was speaking at a gala the other night about this. The whole notion of the term Black composer means that there's inequity in the system. You know what I mean? Because I don't view myself as a Black composer. It's like black jobs, you know. I view myself as a composer, you know, period. And just for that to be the term should let you know that there's a lot of work to be done in this field for everybody to have a voice and let their voices be heard. Because it's not just me. Because, you know, when I talked to Peter Gelb, I said, Peter, man, you know, I can't be, you know, a one-time thing, man. I have to be a turnkey, you know, for a lot of other people to have their voices being heard here at the Met. And to his credit, Peter, you know, commissioned a bunch of people and brought a lot of different people in to have productions there at the Met.
No, it's such an interesting point about the way we describe performers, people in society. Of all things to pop into my mind, you know, when the pandemic hit, everyone was sort of, well, not probably most of us were passing time in ways that we didn't think we would, and looking for comfort food. Came across a channel on a streaming service that was all 1970s and 80s Bob Barker era Price is Right. And I thought, okay, this is interesting.
Wow.
A woman gets called down from the studio audience, and she's dressed a lot, frankly, like the way Kate Shimmer is dressed right now. You know, very professionally. And Bob Barker says, "You're dressed up professionally. Are you a lady attorney?" A lady attorney. And then he said, a lady doctor, perhaps. You know, like, oh, how interesting that a woman might actually, you know, but it didn't say, "Are you an attorney? Are you a doctor?"
Exactly.
It was that qualifier that indicated that it wasn't really either accepted or common, et cetera. And I take the point about the term Black composer. I mean, it's such a powerful point. And I just want to kick it over to Alex and just say, someone we've talked about the power of gateways. There's so many themes that overlap, I think, in what Terrence is talking about is understanding the history that came before you and asking, why did this person never get on this stage? How come I never heard this piece of music? How often does that happen, even in your own work?
Well, I mean, the thought that comes to mind. Well, first off, I think there's this question of agency and choice, right? So there are composers that may want to be known as a Black composer, and that's their choice, right? I think the question is should society make that choice for them? And the answer to that is
right.
no.
Right.
And then in terms of these stories, I mean, last spring, the Gateways Festival was here in Rochester for the first half of the week, and then we went down to New York City. One of the main and ended the week with our return performance at Carnegie Hall. That performance is still available for streaming on WQXR if those folks are interested. But the point I want to make is that the feature piece that we were performing last year in the spring was William Levi Dawson's Negro Folk Symphony. This is an incredible work. It's, I think, one of the great American symphonies, period, full stop, right? Not Black symphony, just great American symphony. That piece was had its premiere week in 1934. The first three performances were given in Philadelphia. The piece was actually commissioned by the Philadelphia Orchestra. I'm gesturing to Kate because Kate used to work for the Philadelphia Orchestra, so she knows this story well. So the first performances on November 13th, 15th, and 17th were in Philadelphia, and then the fourth performance was at Carnegie Hall on November 20th, 1934. When we performed that piece, April 27th, 2025, that was the first time since that performance in 1934 that this work was performed in Carnegie Hall. Now, if you think about in the intervening almost 100 years, 90 years, right, the number of American orchestras that have cycled through Carnegie Hall, particularly if you bring into view youth orchestras, right, it's thousands actually it's at least 1,000 and maybe more of performances and visits by American orchestras, and no one had brought this piece with them. And so, there is still a lot of work to do. And then as it relates to uncover and uplift this piece, part of also, I think, what makes this tradition, right, it's the repeated realizations of the works. That is actually what elevates them to this sort of masterwork level as much as any sort of objective measure of the work itself, right? And certainly the way it's received by the audience may or may not have anything to do with how it ends up sort of locating itself inside of the work. Case in point, Rite of Spring, right? It was roundly rejected, or Bartok's Miraculous Mandarin, roundly rejected, now really core parts of what we do. So, and why? Because we keep realizing them. Right, I was told that I had to figure out, my freshman year in music school, I was told that I had to figure out Rite of Spring, right? That was my work, that I had to come to the work, not that the work had to come to me. And so, the lack of repeat performances of these works is as much a problem as anything. And to Terrence's point about being a turnkey, absolutely. And also, I don't know if Terrence is interested, but I want 10 operas from Terrence, right? I mean, not just one, not two, right? It is a difficult medium to figure out. And when someone obviously has their arms around it the way he does, let's keep going. What else is there? Let's commission more from these artists. I mean, how many Verdi operas, right? How many? And they're not all great, right? They're not all great, but that's how you get the great ones, is by, the repeated realizations of the stuff you have and the repeated commission from composers like Terrence. So again, I can't speak for Terrence and what's on his plate, but I hope that there are more operas coming, because where he started is off the charts, right? Where he started is off the charts. Where will he be if we continue to invest in developing opera through Terrence's voice?
Terrence, can you add anything to that?
Well, given that it took me 2 years to write it, Alex, 10
fair.
10 operas, man.
I know. I understand. You have other stuff to do besides opera. I don't want to be selfish, but
yeah,
please.
no, but I really take his point, because it's like anything else, man. It took me a while to get better at doing film music, and the only way you get better at it is by doing it, having mistakes, understanding that you may have an idea, but that idea may not really manifest itself the way that you really thinking about it in your mind because of other extenuating circumstances, and that's just called experience, right? So I would, I'm starting to work on my third opera now. We have a topic, and we're in the beginning stages of it. And listen, it's to his point. It's the thing about being a jazz musician is that the guys will tell you, in order to really become a proficient jazz musician, you need to put in flight hours like a pilot. So you need to go out and play and play and play as much as you can. Composers don't really get that opportunity the same way, so we have to try to embrace them and give them workshops, give them moments where they can try things and see how things work. Because at this gala that I was just at, Andre Bocelli was there, and he sang for a second. And as soon as he started to sing, man, I started to realize things that I've learned about writing opera in terms of about how to set melodies for certain types of voices and where to put them in the range of the voice to get the maximum effect of storytelling. That only comes from doing it. You know what I mean? So to his point, I understand what he's saying about trying to do more operas, because the experience is the thing that helps you to grow and become better at the craft.
Well, we're talking to an unbelievable panel this hour. Terence Blanchard, a Grammy-winning and Oscar-nominated composer and trumpeter. That just scratches the surface of what Terence Blanchard does, and you're hearing that this hour. And Mark Waters with us, co-director of Soundtracks, and we're talking about this festival. We're talking about Gateways. A lot coming up in the coming days here, right here in Rochester. So Mark is with us. Kate Schimmer, who is the Associate Dean for Artistic Planning at the Eastman School of Music, and Alexander Lang. Alex is President and Artistic Director of the Gateways Music Festival. By the way, before we take our only break, Alex, where can people learn about the full schedule? We mentioned the Soundtracks website, online Gateways where?
Gatewaymusicfestival.org. Also, let me just share on the air that we have a discount. So Gateways 15, GATEWAYS, the number 1, the number 5. That'll give 15% off for any ticket for the festival, including the finale with Maestro Blanchard and his E-Collective and the Gateways Festival Orchestra.
All right. So in our show notes, we'll link you to what Gateways is doing, what Soundtracks is doing. We're going to come back from our only break, and we're going to kind of dig in a little bit more with Mark, with Terence, with the whole panel about some of this work that, if I think about what soundtracks I love, what film scores I love, there's a lot that come to mind. But I'm always wondering, how much do you know about this thing before you got to write this? Do you get to see everything first here? How close are you? How closely is Terence working with Spike Lee? Is it a conversation about concepts, or is he actually seeing a script and a scene? So there's a lot there we'll talk about on the other side of this only break. This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. You heard Alex mention the menu of what's coming up for Gateways. I'm going to ask Kate to just if there's a few that you want to mention. We can't go in depth on everything that's happening next Thursday through Saturday as part of Soundtracks, which is, you guys claim it's the only film music festival in North America. And it probably is if you're saying so. I want to trust that that's correct. I didn't fact check it.
And the first, Evan.
The first and the only. There we go. Yeah. So what are some of we've been talking to Terence Blanchard. That's happening as Gateways wraps up and Soundtracks kicks off with this joint event next Thursday evening. What else is on the menu you want people to know about?
Sure. So as you say, it is an extraordinary set of offerings that we have coming up October 16th through 18th. During the day, what I'd really love to highlight, because these are free, we have panel speaker sessions. These cover topics like music for video games, the art and craft of music for animation, the mystique of Stradivarius. The full listing can be found on soundtracks.org. We've brought in, Mark has brought in a lot of his industry contacts to talk about what they know. So we have video game composers, for instance, Guy Whitmore and Seth Wright coming in to talk about how you score for video games and what that experience is like working with music for video games. We have John Corigliano and Jeff Beal here for the Red Violin, which is our concert on Friday evening. John, who of course wrote the score, Jeff, the Eastman alum, remarkable composer of House of Cards and many other things, will be conducting that. And as I said during the day, there are just an absolute litany of sessions that cover topics related to writing for music, AI and technology in music, and then of course relate to the concert. So the Stradivarius session that I mentioned will be really fantastic. I do want to highlight that Friday morning at 9 o'clock. That's going to feature some of our wonderful faculty, including including Yujin Zhang, who's going to be our soloist on the Red Violin concert. So the full lineup is, again, at soundtracks.org, but there is an absolute litany of free programming with industry professionals who have made marks, Oscar winners, Emmy winners, talking about their craft, talking about how it applies today. So it's all free in the morning, and we're really excited. We really want to share this with the community. It's been a great collaborative effort between the Hajim School of Music and the Eastman School, and our hope is that this is going to be an incredibly rich experience, not only for our students but for the community. We are inviting the community in to experience and learn about this type of work with us.
Now, I tried to avoid this, Mark Waters, but I heard AI get brought up, and as a professor of contemporary media and film composition, are you going to come up with a policy on talking to students about how, hey, I've got this hook, I've got this a couple of bars. You can tell I'm a real musician of music here, but I don't have a finished product. But if I put it in Suno, if I put it in other programs, it will complete it for me. And AI is going to help us complete a lot of half-finished compositions. And isn't that great? What's that conversation with your students like, Mark?
Well, I think if you don't embrace new technology, you're going to get left behind. There's just we're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. So there are right ways to use technology, and there's wrong ways to use it. And I think the right way to use it is to enhance your already existing artistic and craft abilities. There's many ways I can see AI being used in a legitimate, helpful way to. I mean, Terrence will certainly agree. Deadlines are a big part of being a film and television composer. They can either be your friend, or they can be your worst enemy. And if here's a tool that will help you, meet those ridiculous deadlines, great, embrace it, and use it to enhance and make you be a better composer and a more profitable composer.
Okay, well, and I take the point that genie's not going back in the bottle. I will say I'm curious to know, Mark, as the director of the Beale Institute, Jeff Beale is obviously a big name. There's it's really cool for the lay public that's not in this world to understand how this stuff comes together. Can you just talk a little bit about, before I ask Terrence kind of the same question, about what this process is like, about how closely composers are working with, whoever their clients are to create for a soundtrack, for a film, for a streaming series, how much information you have and how you go about that creative process?
Well, an important skill set as a commercial composer is to get all the information you can from the people that have hired you. What do you want? How big do you want it? How fast? What are you trying to say? Who do we communicate? And I think it also behooves a filmmaker to know how music works. They're not, certainly, God forbid, they're going to tell you what notes to choose, but it is important for a filmmaker to understand how film music works so that they can give you, the pathway. I mean, it amazes me. I've worked with producers who they'll sit across the table and say, look, I don't know anything about music. I don't know what to tell you. And I'm thinking, how did you get this job? How did you get this job as a producer at Disney or Warner Brothers, and you don't know anything about music? I mean, I'm not saying you have to be a brilliant pianist, but you have to know, when music works and when it doesn't. And a lot of times for a filmmaker to be able to say, this is what I don't want. I don't want this, 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 and this. That can help you a lot. That can really keep you from going off in 900 different directions and waiting for them to pick one. So I just think that collaboration, I mean, it is a collaborative art. You have to enjoy the art of collaborating. If you don't want to collaborate, then go off and write music just on your own. And maybe people will gravitate to it, maybe they won't, but it's all yours. And it was unfiltered and unchanged. When you're working in TV and film or any commercial idiom, there are other people in the room that are, directing you on it. And you have to like that. You don't have to, it's not enough just to say, oh, I'll put up with that. No, you have to enjoy that. You have to, I mean, some of my best music has come from a direction that came from a filmmaker. There was not a, I want you to think about it this way. I want you to present this person's perspective. Wow, I didn't even think of that. Well, boom, there came, the score.
Let's listen to one if we could. I think we've got Oswald the Rabbit's Poor Papa, which is a composition by Mark Waters for Disney. Let's listen to a little bit of that. Now, I'm going to gather here, having not seen this, Mark Waters, that this is not a film about a man dying of cancer wondering if he will see the birth of his first child. I think that's a very different theme from what I'm hearing there. Tell me about that one, Mark.
Yes. Well, Oswald the Rabbit was a character that Disney created, Walt created in the late 20s, and did, I think, 40 some odd shorts featuring this character. And then he lost control of them, and the shorts disappeared, and he went on to become Walt Disney, and the shorts, kind of went off into oblivion. They found a few of the lost ones a few years ago, and Disney approached me about scoring. We've done 3 of them, and we're possibly going to do more. But it was a wonderful experience trying to imagine what Walt would have asked, because I knew enough about the music that Walt, how he directed his composers and what he told them to do. And so it was fun to imagine what he would have told me to do. So I'm assuming that he would have been happy with it.
That is a instantly powerful piece of music in all the sort of whimsical, fun ways there. And when I looked up Oswald the Rabbit, I'm going, I don't think I know this character, but it was instantly recognizable on a piece of paper. So, I mean, it's interesting to see Mark's work for it. I'm looking at availability here. Mark, is this out yet? I think was out earlier this year, or is it still coming?
What? Oh, the Poor Papa. No, we did it several years ago. I think you can find it on the Snow White 75th anniversary DVD. It's a DVD extra. It's either on that one, or it's on the Bambi one, or it's on the Pinocchio one. They took the 3 so cool. that I did and put them on those 3 DVDs.
Awesome. Thanks for letting us share that, by the way. That we needed to lighten the mood too, and I love that. So
I'm very flattered.
Let me ask Terence Blanchard, a similar question I've been talking to Mark about. So, you started working with Spike Lee before you were fully scoring the films. You were a trumpeter working on the score. You did the trumpet, I think, for Denzel Washington's character in Mo Better Blues. But then Spike Lee wants you to score films. So are you seeing a script? Are you having conversations with Spike Lee? Are you seeing any scenes? I mean, what is that process like for you?
Oh, yeah, you definitely have to see the film. I remember when I first started, I think Mark could probably relate to this. I remember when I first started, I thought I'd get a jump on everybody by just writing music based on the script that I read. And I had to realize the script that I read and the images that were in my mind were my movie. They weren't the same thing that the director had put together. As a matter of fact, the story that I tell all the time, there was one scene for this movie, Summer of Sam, that Spike did. And I loved the scene. There was an argument between Mira Sorvino and John Leguizamo. And I'm like, oh, okay. So started writing this music. And when Spike shot the scene, he shot the scene with Mira Sorvino getting out the car and just an empty seat. And there's just an empty seat there. Now, I could have never imagined that. So trying to write music prior to seeing things, sometimes it works, but for the most part, for me, I'm creating stuff based on my own imagery in my head. So I try to not only see the entire film, but I try to get as much information about the characters as I can from the directors, because sometimes, directors are so involved in the process that some details may slip their minds when talking to composers. Because you got to remember, man, they're dealing with editors, they're dealing with actors, they're dealing with cameras, they're dealing with so much other stuff. Music is one of the last things that comes along. And when we do come along, they're probably still editing the film. So I try to get as much information as possible. I do want to speak on the AI thing, though. The thing that's interesting to me about AI, and And I think Mark is really right about, you have to deal with technology or else you're going to be left behind. The other part of it, though, that I think that we're tending to forget, and I could be wrong about this, but from what I understand and talking to the people that I've talked to about it, AI only goes as far as what it's learned, and I don't know how creative it truly is. It's creative in the sense of assimilating ideas that are already inside the system. So for me, the thing that I've come to is to try to creatively stay a step ahead of AI in terms of not trying to repeat myself creatively when I'm creating new works. And then there are other things too. There was a woman who was a choreographer, and she told me she used AI in a way where she took all of these still photos of these ballerinas and put it in a system, and then let the AI create a video of moving from one piece to the next, which I thought was really interesting, So I think there's interesting applications for it, but we have to get past. It's a similar thing that happened when I first started using computers, man. When I hanging around jazz musicians who weren't into electronic music, they kept asking me, so the computer writing the music for you? I'm like, no, it's just assisting me in terms of like being able to produce printed music and actually being able to hear my orchestrations, So I think the future is bright, but like anything else, it'll all come out in the wash. We will be able to tell those who use AI versus those who are creative.
I want to think that's correct. I will say, I as a consumer who is not in your world, I'm not in Mark or Alex or Terrence or Kate's world. I'm the lay public. I remind myself that it's only getting better. And it is certainly true that AI, whatever you're asking it to produce, is only really as good as the prompt. So the detailed prompt, but also the detailed information, which could be bodies of work. It could be 30 years of work of one musician or artist. It could be film scores. I want to recognize that it's better than I thought it was going to be already 3 years ago. And I also want to say that I kind of don't care if it gets better. I don't want it to, number one, take anybody's job. And I want humans creating the work. I want to consume work created by humans. So I don't want to be naive. I know it's getting better than I ever thought it could be. And it's only going to get better from here. But I still would rather say, hey, this is Mark's work versus Mark put a 12-word prompt in and here's what got spat out. Isn't it cool? I'm not trying to be glib, but Mark Waters, I don't want your students losing jobs, I guess is what part of what I'm saying here. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I think the biggest effect that AI will have is on lower budget projects, which my students are the ones who go into those projects. I mean, that's usually the first projects you get are low budget because they can't afford a Terrence Blanchard, so they can hire. And we all got started that way. Thank God that there are projects like that. So I do worry about AI replacing individual custom-made scores and that. I'm hoping that it'll be a flash in the pan. Okay, well, that was neat. So now we did that. Now let's move on, to something, else, because the public is always wanting new and different things. I mean, that's never going to stop. But you're right to bring up that, there is going to be, some bad and negative things on it. I think the thing we have to keep focusing on is, okay, that's neat. That's one thing. But have you heard Terrence Blanchard's most recent score? I mean, it's, that ain't AI, my friend. That came out of a man's brain, and that's different. So.
Well, the other thing too about that I think is important to talk about. When I was listening to Andre Bocelli the other night, one of the things that I kept saying to myself was, you can't teach that. The way that man would sing, you can't, that's something that comes from his background, that comes from his childhood, his life experiences, all of those things combined, and I think that's where we as human beings will always have a step ahead. I understand the fear of AI, because you're right. For low budget projects, it probably can't, because we saw what happened with the writer's strike, in LA. you know, with people trying to use Chat GBT and all these other systems, you know, to create scripts. So there's a valid point there, you know, but it's one of the things where I always try to encourage my students to dig deep in their own souls, to try to come up with their own sounds, their own personality, and give them the tools to develop that, as opposed to just, while it's important to study our history and know how this music evolved and understand the technical side of it, there's also a need for us as educators to recognize certain unique talents in students and give them the tools to develop those things, because that's the thing that's going to keep them ahead of the curve.
Kate and Alex, want to jump in here? Go ahead, Kate.
I do. Terrence, I'm so glad you brought up education. This is critical to me. It's making sure that what we're doing at Eastman, which is nurturing the individual creative talents and giving kids time and the tools to figure out their own individual voices, their own individual talents. But it's also the work that we're doing with the Hagem School of Engineering to make sure that they're educated about the technology that is out there. They know how to use it. They know how to use it to help them as they find themselves as artists. And to Mark's point, that we're teaching them, you know, when you use it and when you don't. But understanding it, understanding what it's capable of, I think is critical if you are entering a field where it's becoming more and more prevalent.
Anything you want to add, Alex?
No, a couple of things. One thing that comes to mind is the people that AI will create a pathway into the business, right? So, you know, particularly if you think about like composition. So, you know, I think the hip hop producer Jay Dilla is a composer. Right, he organized sound in a very intentional way. You know when you're listening to his stuff in the same way, you know it's Carter Burwell or Terrence Blanchard. I don't know that Jay Dilla necessarily had the training and skills to like notate his work such that it could be realized by an orchestra. But that has typically been sort of the barrier about who gets to call themselves a composer or not. But I think that we're about to leave that behind us, right? Because anyone will be able to produce a score of sound that they've organized. So I think that's going to lower some barriers actually and bring some new voices into the space that aren't here right now because they can't get over this technical barrier, which is really irrelevant to the whether or not you have organized the sound, right? I mean, so you can organize it. So I think there's that. Then I think offers some possibilities. I also think from a music learning perspective, you know, lost often in the telling of the story of Mozart and his sister is the fact that their father was like the greatest living violin teacher in Europe at the time. We see this all the time in music. I mean, earlier Terrence mentioned Branford Marsalis. We all know just the amount of amazing musical talent and ability that came out of Ellis Marsalis as the leader of that household. So what is it to have so music is an interesting thing where it's like one of the few things where it's like the normal thing, right? You go up, you get your clarinet and they're like, okay, here's your first lesson. Okay, see you in a week. Right? And you're like on your own practicing for a week. So imagine if one of your parents is a professional musician and maybe can navigate that difficult thing with kids, right? And they actually listen to you. What an advantage that is. I think AI is going to give us the opportunity to reduce that isolation actually so that you could have a practice partner in there. You could dial it up to be, Russian conservatory levels of meanness and abuse, or you could dial it down to be, someone like, hey, let's play duets together. They could listen to you maybe and give you some feedback. Hey, it seems like you're struggling with that passage here. Maybe you might try practicing it this way. Or like, you're not making progress. You need to take a break.
I hope it will be collaborative in the way you're describing instead of outsourcing the creativity. As long as it's collaborative.
Yeah, no, I think
good.
some will be outsourced for sure. I also think we can look to chess, which is where AI first showed up long before these other.
Right.
Human-on-human chess is more popular than it's ever been. Human-on-human chess is more popular than it's ever been. And the whoever the grandmaster is right now, I can't remember his name, but I've heard an interview where he easily, freely admits, like, yeah, no, my phone, I can't beat my phone.
I think that might be Kasparov, but I mean, regardless,
right? But the interest in human-on-human chess doesn't. So I think there's also some possibilities that in an era of deep fakes and is it real or not, the opportunity to come and see live music on acoustic instruments might actually rise in its value.
Well, why don't we all go see live music next week?
Let's do it.
You got Gateways coming up. You have soundtracks coming up here. And as we wrap, listener says, Just watched Inside Man last night. It was
there.
phenomenal.
It was amazing.
Said had some great sound in it.
Oh,
So,
my
you know,
goodness.
Terrence Blanchard's getting everybody excited here.
Such a great film, Terrence. I enjoyed the mess out of that last night. Really, it really
Oh,
got
man,
me
thank
excited
you.
to see.
Thank you for
next
editing
week.
yourself there, Alex.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everyone. As we close, by the way, instead of hearing the typical Connections music, you're going to hear a little bit of Terrence Blanchard. You're going to hear Benny's tune from Terrence's album Flow, which you can check out. Terrence Blanchard, it has been our great pleasure. Thank you for making time for the program today.
Oh man, it's been a blast talking to you guys and listening to everybody speak. Thank you for having me.
You're going to see Terrence Blanchard in Rochester next Thursday night as Gateways wraps up and Soundtracks kicks off. Mark Waters, have a great time with that, with the whole festival. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us, Mark.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Great pleasure to have Alexander Lang, as always, from the Gateways Music Festival. Have a great festival.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much. And Kate Schimmer, Associate Dean for Artistic Planning at the Eastman School of Music. What a week you guys have here. Thank
It's
you.
gonna be wonderful.
Thanks for sharing with us. Again, in our show notes, we'll have links to the websites for Gateways, Soundtracks. Check it out. A lot for you to consume there. We'll listen to a little bit of Terrence as we close, and we'll be back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.